This episode made possible in part by educator, hobby comic book collector, and pop culture enthusiast Sam Lim. Sam is based in the South Jersey area and is looking to connect with other comics fans as well as retailers. They're also looking for comic shops to explore, so recommendations are welcome. Be sure to follow Sam on Instagram at SZLComics to see their latest comic pickups and shop adventures. Aw Yeah Comics celebrates and promotes everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, aka my local comic shop, Skokie, Illinois, or Muncie, Indiana. If you have kids and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow Aw Yeah on social media for more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. In the 1950s, George Reeves embodied the Man of Steel in Superman's first television adaptation, from its gritty black and white beginnings to the kid-friendly color years. To this day, an entire generation reveres George as their Superman, while for others, the show remains an overlooked chapter in the character's mythology. On this podcast, we bring everyone together as we break down each episode of Adventures of Superman. Welcome to another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss Season 2, Episode 9, The Dog Who Knew Superman, is first-time guest Joey Dienberg. Joey, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
It's great, man. It's wonderful to connect with you. You reached out, I guess it was while I was covering Season 1, and you shared your love of this television show generally, but this episode specifically. And we'll get into the specifics of all of it, but let me just ask you, I guess, the big picture question first. Why this episode, and what role does this episode play in your larger Adventures of Superman fandom?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, who doesn't love a dog? And second of all, so I think right around the age when I was about 5 or 6, my dad, I think, was telling somebody at work that, you know, their kid had just gotten into the Christopher Reeve Superman movies, and I was loving those. And we didn't have cable, didn't have Nick at Night or anything like that. And my dad's coworker took it upon himself to record on Nick at Night a few times. And I think maybe there was 10 or 15 episodes on the VHS tape. And this was probably the first one. So every time I put it in, this is where I started. So I fell in love with the show, fell in love with this specific episode. And then I'd say, I don't remember what year the DVD sets came out, but as soon as those came out, I had them all right away, and then kind of fell in love with the entirety of the show, and the rest was history there.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's really cool. Well, I can certainly understand then why this one made such an impression on you, and I'm excited to talk about this episode. So again, this is The Dog Who Knew Superman, aired November 14th, 1953, written by David Chandler, directed by Tommy Carr. Here is my synopsis. Superman rescues a dog named Corky from a well. The dog belongs to Joyce and her husband Hank, who runs a bookie syndicate in Metropolis and hates the dog. Corky grabs a glove dropped by Clark near the well and later tracks Clark down at the Daily Planet, taking his other glove. When Hank sees Corky with the second glove, he deduces that Corky has identified Superman's civilian guise. Suspicious of the high reward being offered for Corky's return, Clark directs Jimmy to take the dog to a kennel. Hank kidnaps Jimmy to learn the dog's location, but his dim-witted henchman Louie fears Superman and instead brings Corky to the dog catcher. Superman rescues Corky, and Lois and Jimmy track down Corky's address and reunite him with Hank. Hank tries to make Corky lead him to Superman, but Corky's barking tips off Clark in the nick of time, and he changes to Superman and nabs Hank. So that's our overview of this episode here. I guess before we get into our scene-by-scene breakdown, obviously this is an episode you spent a lot of time with over the years. And I guess I'm just curious, after all this time and after all these viewings, I don't know, have your impressions of it changed at all? Do you glean anything different from it after all this time? Has it been the same? I know there can be a charm in that as well. Just curious, the experience that you've had with all of these viewings.
You know, I'll be honest, your coverage of this show has changed a little bit of my perspective, and not in a bad way. It's more of I'm picking up on some of the tropes that you're pointing out. It's fun to look at it from another angle. So I was sitting there. I completely missed I missed the kidnapping part, at the, jumping right to the end where he hangs him up on the burglar alarm, and I'm sitting there like, what did he do wrong? He just for having the dog try to catch Superman, and he's like, oh yeah, the kidnapping thing. Kind of forgot about that. I was like, what crime did he commit here? So I was thinking he was just leaving him to hang there just because he got a little too close. And it was the other big thing was the thing I never noticed is the genuine frustration the entire episode that Clark has. He is getting extremely frustrated with everybody about how close this dog is to revealing a secret identity. So just, the gruffness, the different angles, that's kind of the big things that I was looking at differently this time.
So a couple of things. One, there's a moment we'll get to where Clark is very frustrated with Louie when Louie's supposed to deliver the dog, and he's like, I took care of it. And Clark, it's like season 1 Clark back, and he grabs him. He's like, where's the dog? What'd you do with the dog? And it was great. I love that. To your earlier point, it's funny. I do think about this when we talk about these episodes, because we are looking at them critically. I mean, I don't feel like we're unnecessarily harsh or nitpicky usually, but we are looking at them critically, and we're looking at them in the context of all of these other comic book stories and other media adaptations of the character. And so we're seeing these connection points and how they compare. And I know that there are a lot of people, whether they grew up watching these decades ago or more recently like yourself, but people who have these childhood memories of these episodes and, maybe just kind of love and enjoy them in a very pure, innocent way. And then here we are. It's like, they should have done this. They should have done that. This doesn't track. And I never want to ruin the viewing experience for anyone or pick it apart to the extent that it kind of like shatters that glass and then they can't look at it. So hopefully that's not the case for anyone.
No, not at all.
I always try to have fun. Well, on that note, I would sound like a jerk if I came on here like, this is not a good episode. Look, the dog is super cute. Love the dog. George is great with the dog. Dogs, children, it opens up this whole other dimension to his character, to his performance. So I thought he was great. And I feel like there's some standout moments along the way. When Jimmy's kidnapped and they subject him to that lie detector test, I thought that was really funny. I thought Jack Larson was phenomenal in that scene.
Yeah.
I guess for me, overall, I look at this episode and I'm like, okay, there's some cool moments along the way. It didn't really coalesce into a really strong, gripping outing for me. But I think in terms of what it set out to do, to kind of be this fun yarn about the dog who's figured out Superman's secret identity, I think it's successful in that respect. I will say, though, after Superman rescues the dog from the dog catcher, it really felt like the episode was done, and it kind of felt like maybe it should have been done. And then to me, it got a little tedious as we were getting into those final scenes there. It just kind of felt like, all right, like we're good. I felt great, but we kept going, and that's fine. But it's definitely a charming episode.
Yeah. I definitely think it's a rite of passage. Every great Superman actor has had a great dog interaction.
Oh, interesting.
Whether it was Tom Welling, Superman 3 with Christopher Reeve when he saves the puppy, it's a rite of passage.
That's true. No, that's a good point. And again, not to belabor the point, but we're in season 2. This is a different era of the show. It's softened, it's lightened, and to do an episode like this, I think it works well enough. Oh, you brought up something else though that was interesting about what did Superman even have on this guy? And you're right, it is the kidnapping. It's a funny thing because you watch this episode and I like that scene where Jimmy's kidnapped and he's under the lie detector test. Again, I thought it was really funny, but it is one of those things where I'm sort of like, all right, I feel like we're just kind of killing time here a little bit, but I guess you do kind of need that critical piece because he runs this bookie syndicate, but Superman has no knowledge of this or evidence of this. So I don't know that he would have really been able to do much on that front. So I think that kidnapping piece was really critical to all of it.
Yep, absolutely.
So quick guest star breakdown. We have Ben Weldon as Hank. He's in 8 episodes across all 6 seasons of Adventures of Superman. We have Donna Drake as Joyce, who Hank refers to as Chicken. And we have Billy Nelson as Louie, who is in 5 episodes across seasons 2, 3, 4, and 6. I think the one other big picture takeaway that I had that was like particularly interesting and surprising, especially given the time period, was the dynamic between Joyce and Hank. I guess before I say more, what was your take on the way that they regard and relate to each other?
Yeah, the standout scene with them, I think, is you married the boss's daughter, like that that whole thing. It's they didn't have to give them a unique relationship, and I thought it worked. It's just it felt unique, but it also fit right in at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. I think what I found so striking about this was what a ball breaker she was,
Yeah,
and how tough and feisty it was. I've been talking about how I've been longing for the Phyllis Coates season 1 Lois Lane, and episode after episode, man, I'm really missing her a lot. And I was like getting kind of vibes of that, which was great, and I felt very much at home. But especially given that time period, to have the wife in the couple be the one who's really more domineering and really calls him out. There's one scene where she's shaking her fist at him. And I think the reason that stood out to me so much, I've mentioned this in so many episodes. I love The Honeymooners, the classic sitcom, The Honeymooners. One of the things that, through a modern lens that we have to just sort of acknowledge for what it is the whole bang zoom bit, right? Where Ralph Cramden essentially in all these episodes is threatening to pop his wife, like send her to the moon. And you watch all those episodes and look, she gives it right back to him and they go at it. And I think in terms of how the scenes play out, it's not, it's more even handed, whatever. But still, I kind of have that in my mind. And so to flip that and have the wife be the one like swinging the fist at him, I was just like, oh, that was kind of, I don't know, refreshing, I guess, especially given the time period.
Yeah. And on another note too, and I've said this to my wife, so she won't be offended when I say this. I think everybody who's got a dog has had some irritation that, I think the spouse might care about the dog on some days more than you, where you've been, you forget a few things and you mess up a little bit and and you're like, wow, look at this. This dog, was just making a mess on the carpet and he's getting more love than I am today.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's definitely, I have to say in my own marriage, we've never had a pet. We've dog sat, but we've never actually had one. So I haven't experienced that, but I could definitely imagine that being the case. So yeah, that's the thing. Even though, this guy, I really don't have any sympathy. He pushes.
Yeah, I don't think he's that great of a guy.
Off screen, he pushes the dog down the well. That's our jumping off point for the episode. Later, he pushes the dog. He lets the dog go, only wants the dog for his own selfish ends. So I don't have any sympathy for this guy for the most part. But again, just kind of keeping in mind that dynamic of him feeling neglected and really, again, this seemingly very feisty, we'll put it that way, very feisty wife. It's just interesting. And that's, I really do give them credit for that because I feel like that adds a really cool dash of color to this episode. Ironically, it's black and white, but like a fun dynamic that they could have very easily just played it more straight or more subdued or more like he's just the domineering husband and she's cowering in the corner, right? It would have been all right. But I feel like this gave it some pop. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Shall we go to our scene by scene discussion here?
Let's do it.
All right. So I'll kind of lay out each scene as we go through the episode and then, whatever stands out and whatever you want to talk about, we'll get into it. So we open at the well where you have all of these people, including Hank and Joyce gathered around the well. A dog has fallen in. And, very quickly we get to this dynamic that we were talking about here of Joyce chastising Hank. He was supposed to just let the dog out of the car to go for a walk. And she accuses him of pushing the dog in. And later he ultimately admits to this. Very conveniently, as everyone is working on this rescue operation, who happens to drive by but Clark Kent? Just, I don't know.
Conveniently stops his car.
Yeah, just out for a drive in the country with his driving gloves. Now, I was fascinated by this. I think out of everything in this episode, this is the thing I was so struck by. This is so random, but did you watch How I Met Your Mother by any chance?
I did.
Okay, because Ted Mosby has his eccentricities, and one of them that I don't think they even really introduce until the final season is that he wears these driving gloves, and all the rest of the gang, kind of bust his chops for it. But that's what I had in my head as I saw, because who doesn't need them, right? And
Yeah.
Was your read that they're actually driving gloves? Like, I didn't take it that it's cold and that's why he's wearing them, and he wouldn't need them for that anyway.
As a kid, to me they were just gloves, but now I'm like, okay, yeah, those are driving gloves. That was a thing of the era, and it makes more sense now, honestly, than as a kid. It's like, why is Superman even wearing gloves?
Yeah, it's one of those things. Obviously, he has to wear them so that we can have an episode, because the dog needs to find one glove at the scene and then find the other glove at his office. But I mean, I haven't been tracking this along the way. I'll keep an eye out for it as we move forward. I don't think he wears driving gloves in other episodes. So again, a necessity of the plot in this case, but it's just, I don't know, it's a stylish move for the guy. And like you said, I guess in keeping with the times maybe, but I don't know. I just kind of like this idea. It just drives up, his driving gloves, gets out, and quickly changes to Superman and inadvertently drops one of the gloves as he's doing so. And now
one of the things that popped in my mind too is, has he lost a lot of ties over the years? I feel like Superman has to be very good at kind of collecting the clothes back up and kind of doing a quick count. So that's a big slip up on his end of leaving something behind.
That's true. Yes, I know. That is something you would really have to be very mindful of as you're engaging in those quick changes all the time. One of the things we've kind of called the show out for in other episodes is when, and it's especially egregious in instances where there's stock footage that they're splicing in, but times where people would have to be blind to not see like Clark run away and change. But here I'll give them this. Everyone really seems hyper focused on the well. So I can buy that they don't see this. I mean, random stranger drives up and then disappears and then Superman shows up. But again, their attention really seems to be occupied. So I'll go along with it.
And something I again, didn't notice as a kid, definitely notice now, especially kind of listening to the coverage of the show is pointed it out to me, is the stock footage where the landscape all of a sudden is a lot different. Now they're, instead of the nice foliage, it's a big boulder that he can go change behind, which out in the, just outside of Metropolis, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. The geography of of this Metropolis is really wild. So he changes to Superman. And it's fine. As I'm watching this, he has a really long descent. And I'm saying to myself, what is that? But then he digs underground and you see him shoot into the ground. And I mean, you can see where, he just goes like right into a pre-made hole, but still, like, I thought it was cool. I love that they attempted that. And, just watching it quickly and keeping in mind people were watching this decades ago on a tiny TV, like, it looked cool.
It did. I watched a few episodes leading in just to kind of get back in, and it's funny where you can really tell sometimes they're stretching the flights to add some time to the episode where, like, that music's really playing for a while on this one, but that was kind of nice and quick and to the point.
Exactly. I know. This just came up in an episode I did with our mutual friend, Zach, from Always Hold On to Smallville, Shot in the Dark, where it opens on Superman flying. And it's like, I don't know how much this really adds, but maybe they, and then that, like, in that episode, that like a long lingering shot on the Daily Planet building. We came up with a couple of reasons for why that might have been, but yeah, I mean, it could be that they just needed to fill some time. But yeah, this works here. So you have him burrow underground and he comes up from under the well and rescues the dog. And again, just in keeping with this very spicy Joyce character, not grateful at all to Superman for this. Just like, give me the dog. I don't know. What was your reaction to that exchange and that rescue?
It's definitely to set the stage where this isn't just a happy family that Superman swept in and saved the puppy, that there's something different about them. And maybe they're not the best of characters, because even though while she's painted a little bit as the better half of the relationship, she's still a part of this seedy underworld, and it has to, you have to show that they're not going to be just the grateful, happy family, because later in the episode, it does allude to the fact that she turns on a dime on how clever he is with his plot.
Yeah, absolutely. So he returns the dog to them, and as they're walking away, Corky picks up one of the glove that Clark had dropped there. And before that, you did get a really great close-up shot of of George as Superman with the dog. Yeah. And that was just, I mean, just that charm, that smile, as what I was talking about before, just a great moment. And again, if you're a kid, regardless of what decade you're watching this, but if you're a kid watching it, I could see how this would be, an enjoyable episode.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we're done at the well, and then we're back at Hank and Joyce's apartment, and we also have Louie there playing his yo-yo. And
I loved that as a constant bit throughout the episode. I loved tucking it under the seat and just kind of hanging on to it. And it's just, you didn't have to. I'm curious if that's an actor choice, if that was an interesting director choice of, specifically, hey, we're going to have this yo-yo bit going through this entire episode.
Yeah, that is interesting. I wonder. I doubt something like that would have been scripted per se, but yeah, whether that was direction, something the actor did or whatnot. But yeah, he's playing yo-yo. He is a little bit of a yo-yo, this guy, but ends up playing, again, a very, very critical role as things unfold here. So in this scene, again, I think you get a lot more of that dynamic between the two of them, the resentment that Hank feels towards this dog. Right, the dog is this, nice bed in the corner, and Joyce is going to go off to get him this big bone and just, really, really pamper him and treat him like royalty. And you get the backstory too, where he talks about how he's the boss of the top bookie syndicate in Metropolis, and like you had said earlier, it's like, well, the only reason that happened is because he married the boss's daughter. So you get a lot of information, and again, more insight into this dynamic here. And we do get this moment though, where. Again, I watched it twice. I think he does give the dog a push when she's holding him, right?
Yeah. More of a smack, I would say.
Yeah, not great.
Definitely gonna cement himself as the bad guy to the episode to a lot of people.
Yeah, very much so. And beyond that, when she goes in to get Corky the dog, he lets the dog out. He opens the dog and sends him out. And Joyce is not. I mean, to say she's not pleased is putting it mildly. She is irate. This is where we really have that, that fist swinging, and she demands that he put an ad in the paper, right, to try to find the dog, and that kind of sets him off on his mission there.
The thing I was thinking about is this is clearly a skyrise. There's got to be at least a dozen doors that dog has to get through to get out of that building. So. They could have. She could have gone at least towards the stairs, at least, and instead of just sticking her head out the door. It brings to mind the big quote from Billy Madison that I won't necessarily go through, but for those who know it, just you got to go out there and look for your dog.
You know what? That's a really good point on a couple of fronts. One that, maybe. Since the dog had just run out, maybe make some attempt to go after him in that building because he's got a lot of ground to cover. But then not only does he have to get down that building, and again, must be a very resourceful dog, but then he's got to get to Clark's office in the Daily Planet. So now you have a whole other layer of obstacles. We'll just go with it. But speaking of, so the dog seemingly tracks Clark's scent from the glove that he found at the well to the Daily Planet, right? Or just it's Superman scent. Yeah, wait, I'm thinking about something now. What scent specifically do you think it was? I mean, the glove really seems to be the key piece here. And then he takes the other glove when he's there, but he was also held by Superman. So he would have had his scent. I mean, I don't know. What do you think was, I'm really overthinking this, but what do you think was really the primary? I guess what's my point? Was the glove even necessary? Was it enough that he would be smelling Superman and the costume and the cape? Could he have found him from just that, or did he need the glove?
I think he kept the glove initially as a souvenir, and then when he found him, he's like, "Oh, hey, here's another one." But he was looking for the person initially, looking for the scent of the person. But it must be a very, very super scent.
I suppose. But he finds Clark, and he's on Clark's desk, and Lois and Jimmy come in. And Clark makes the dog get down. Now, I think it's Lois who's like, "Oh, Clark, how can you be so mean?" Did you feel like Clark was particularly mean to the dog? I didn't feel like it was over the top.
This is right where I first saw the frustration in Clark come in. Like, oh, as soon as he came into his office, like, "Oh, I've got a huge problem right now," and it's kind of it's more of a flusteredness that maybe this Clark gets flustered more often than any other you see, but you can definitely see where it's a little bit different than his normal personality. And Lois is, maybe she's seen him around other dogs and know that maybe he's a friendly guy, and just, why is he being more the dismissive, And I will say again, as somebody who has a dog, when you're a little dismissive of the dog, maybe it can be taken off as, oh my gosh, why aren't you giving him all your love and attention at this moment?
No, fair enough. Fair enough. I guess I'm thinking of him compared to like Hank, but yeah, compared to like normal loving standards. Yeah, I guess Clark was a little short with the dog.
A little cold.
And Jimmy has a great line where he's like, "Do you suppose he thinks you're someone else? Oh, Jim, if only you knew." And the dog takes the other glove, and Clark's like, "Well, he's welcome to it," because he lost the other one. And
so his day's already started off poorly with that. He's frustrated that he lost his glove.
I think about this guy. First of all, his drive gets interrupted. Right. Who knows? I talk about this every episode, the private life of this Clark Kent. I don't know what this guy gets up to, but I love it. And the imagination wanders, and it's great. But it's like, who knows where he was going, where he was coming from. His day gets interrupted. He loses one glove. He performs this rescue. It's all wet. The owner is ungrateful. Now this dog tracks it down, takes his other glove. You understand why this guy is always ready to bite your head off. Fat Moose Comics is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Established in 1982 and under new ownership since 2020, Moose sells a wide selection of comics from every publisher and time period, along with action figures, graphic novels, posters, statues, and more. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you're in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. We reference the television series Smallville a lot around here, and there's one Smallville rewatch podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring tremendous insight, passion, and humor as they discuss each and every episode of the series that ushered in the renaissance of superhero TV. Listen to Always Hold On to Smallville wherever you get podcasts, and keep an eye out for the other shows under the Always Hold On to banner, including Arrow, DC's Legends of Tomorrow, Superman and Lois, and Star Wars. Filmmakers and movie fans alike should be sure to attend these film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, Point Lookout on Long Island, and Round Reel in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Take it from an alum of two of them. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the festivals on social media for news about events, discounts, tickets, and more. Also, listen to the Hang On to Your Shorts and Cullen on Film podcasts, available via a shared universe network. So the dog leaves, but Jim says, "I don't think you're rid of that dog by a long shot." And outside the Daily Planet, this is where Hank shows up, because Hank is going to the paper to take out an ad to find the dog because, again, Joyce is like, "You better." And so Hank sees Corky with the glove and tries to grab Corky, but Corky runs away, but drops the glove in the process. And so now Hank has the glove, and it's unspoken at this point. We just kind of see his reaction to this. He doesn't articulate anything yet. I feel like this was quite a leap that Hank makes here, a leap in logic, that because the dog has tracked down this glove, he's found Superman. Did this make sense?
I'll be honest with you. This is one of those ones where it's really hard to take away the years and years of, as a 5-year-old, this is an amazing plot. This is deep. It's layered. There's a lot going on here. So it is hard to strip it away. For just my entire life of this one being ironclad, if you will.
Yeah. Again, I don't mean to pick it apart, but it's just, I guess, I'm trying to figure out.
I see what you're saying there, where it does seem. I could definitely see it as a leap.
Yeah, again, I don't know if I'm overthinking this or not thinking about it enough, or I'm just like missing something. But it's just, if they found this glove, I don't know. Like, I guess they realized there was this glove at the scene, and a person unaccounted for. It must have been Superman. I don't know. It felt like an awfully big leap to make, but he's made it. So much so he goes back to the apartment, and now he's had a change of heart. He's got to get this dog back. He's going to offer a $5,000 reward. So
now,
he's
did
all
you
in.
calculate the inflation difference there?
I've been doing that for these episodes. I neglected to it this time, but I probably like 50,000 or something. I don't know if you did the math.
I did not. It's something that popped in my head. I'm like, God, I wonder what that would be today. But
yeah,
that sounds about right.
I mean, that when you think about it, $5,000 today would be worth going out and looking for a missing dog.
Oh yeah.
So back then, yeah, that's kind of a crazy amount. And he tells Louis to spread the word. And so next, Clark gets a call from Louis, who's very, kind of like cagey, mysterious, right? He won't identify who his boss is, but he wants to tell Clark, this reporter, that his boss is offering $5,000 for the return of this dog who was saved by Superman. And Clark's antenna are up, right? He knows this is kind of off, right? That someone would offer this kind of a reward, and especially without identifying who the owner is.
And Louis kind of gives that away too, where he's saying, I'm not going to cross Superman. He's aware of the plan. He's like, I'm not getting involved in this.
Well, that comes later.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But that does come. But at this point, it's still, because at this point, Hank hasn't kind of shown his hand to Joyce and Louis yet. He's just like $5,000 for this dog. And so Clark's like, you better come in. Poor Louis. Louis's like, yeah, I better do that. I get confused on the telephone sometimes. It's like, poor Louis. This poor guy.
And it brings a lot of attention to, my favorite thing about the show is the journalist side of Clark Kent, where he's saying, you have a reputation. You are the person to tell things to because you make things happen. I mean, it just makes you think about all of the non-episodes and all the stories that this Clark Kent has broken that didn't necessarily involve Superman. And it's just one of my favorite things about the show.
It's true. And yeah, there's a lot that I think maybe we have to kind of just fill in on our own sometimes as far as what he's up to. But then there are like from season 1, the Czar of the Underworld episode where they're making a movie based on the series of articles Clark had written about that crime boss. It's like, yeah, man, like this guy takes people down in both of his lives, which is awesome. I really love that. So he tells Louis to come in, but in the meantime, Clark tells Jimmy to take Corky, who's back at the planet. He's come back and he's barking on Clark's desk. And he tells Jimmy to take Corky to a private kennel because Clark is suspicious and they want to get the dog out of Dodge, essentially. And Lois has a remark where she's like, oh, you seem frightened, Mr. Kent. And he says he's not, but to your point, you could definitely tell he's like flustered by all of this.
Yeah, very tense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not to run this joke into the ground, but he's probably thinking, all right, I have to put this dog up in the cabin in the mountains. It's getting crowded up there. We talked in the other episode. It's hard enough. All the people he has to stash up there. He's got to feed them, house them, clothe them, educate them when you've got kids involved. And now he's pet care. It's like a whole thing. But I guess enough people get put there and then it just becomes its own community and they can fend for themselves. So in a way it could work.
And honestly, to some point, he could have picked up on the fact that these people weren't, model citizens, and maybe a solution that he didn't think of is kind of go the approach that Smallville took, and I'm just going to take this dog home. This is my dog now.
Yeah,
that could have been a much easier solution.
I know.
I think he would have been very happy being Clark's dog, and
I guess. So, we'll get to the final scene, which is really kind of a tearjerker of Clark saying goodbye to the dog. But yeah, I don't know. You don't get the sense that he ever really entertains the prospect of keeping the dog. If he does, it's never said. I mean, maybe there's a part of him and that's why he's sad at the end, but it's like, I guess it would be so impractical that he's at the planet all day, but,
and for the serialized nature of the show, definitely wouldn't work there to have this dog popping in future episodes.
Yeah. So out on the sidewalk, Louis and Jimmy pass by, but Jimmy is too far gone with the dog. But Louis realizes that Jimmy has the dog and is taking him away. Hank is very displeased when Louis reveals that he did not get the dog and that instead Jimmy was taking him somewhere. So they go back to the planet and they take Jimmy hostage. again, our mutual pal Zach, one of the things he does on his Smallville Rewatch podcast, he has all of these counts, right? Count every time a certain line is said or a certain trope is used or a certain combination of clothing, whatever the case may be. And when I was starting this podcast, I reached out to him for advice. I'm like doing a Superman Rewatch podcast, like anything I should keep in mind. And one of the things he said was like having those charts and those counts, like it's a lot of work, but it could be fun. And I was like, I don't think that's for me. But now I'm like, I could have done one with Jimmy getting kidnapped because it's very regular.
Yes. Yeah. It's they can put a lot of people away for that crime.
Yeah. That's half the people. Half the people in prison are just there for you think most
Did you kidnap Jimmy Olsen too?
Yeah, most of the people, I feel like most of the people in the prison in Metropolis are there for kidnapping Lois and or Jimmy. And then you've got this whole other contingent out in the mountains for learning Clark's secret. It's like people are just disappearing left and right. The Metropolis population really dwindling there. All right, this scene in the apartment with Jimmy blindfolded and hooked up to the lie detector machine. This was so funny to me. And the things that stood out the most when they ask him his name, he says Herman Glockenspiegel, right? Or something like that. And then they're like, no, and then the machine shows he's lying. He goes, all right, you got me. It's Archie Glockenspiegel. It was great. That was so funny. I love that. What did you think of that scene?
Yeah, there's a few more points where I thought he could have done a few more strategic lies to point them in the wrong direction. I was like, come on. And it seemed like he almost didn't know he was hooked up to the machine.
Yeah, it's hard to gauge what Jim knows, but there's still it still feels like there's a cleverness and a savvy to him in this scene, which I really like. And where'd you take the dog? Bermuda, and he's going on with this bit, which I thought was funny. But through the question and answer and looking at the reading on the machine, they do decipher that he took the dog to a kennel in a certain part of Metropolis, so they're able to narrow it down. But I thought now. I think it is in the scene where Hank now reveals to Joyce and Louie what his plan is. Essentially, he's going to extort Superman. Superman won't be able to interfere with their racketeering business because they'll know his secret identity, right? They're going to use the dog to find out who Superman is. And again,
it's very reminiscent of in The Dark Knight, where you are about to accuse a billionaire of beating up criminals at night, and your plan is to blackmail him. Like somebody needed to sit down and have this conversation with them of, he's got a mountain that he takes people like you.
That would be great. Oh man. If I ever had the opportunity, I guess I could write fan fiction, but if I ever had the opportunity, like if DC ever did a Superman 52 comic book series, a la Superman 78, and a story set in this world, oh my God, I would have a feel I would be writing it, but in my hypothetical world, I would be, and I would go, oh man, I would go nuts with this. And I feel like you could do a whole thing where whether Superman allows it or actively promotes it, or it just kind of happens on its own, like word spreads among the populace of the cabin in the mountains because the threat. But this is where he tells them that the plan he's going to extort Superman. And you get this read on Louie's face. Like, again, it's hard to gauge what's really computing in his head, but you could tell this isn't landing quite right with him, which of course will pay off in these upcoming scenes here. So you get the sense Louie's not totally on board with this, but you don't know what he's going to do. So then we get this call you were talking about before, where Louie calls again and he's got the dog in the bag. We can see that. And Clark tells him to come in, and now he doesn't have the dog. No dog, no bag, nothing. And that's where Louie keeps saying, I took care of it, right? And this is where he lays out, essentially, he was afraid of Superman. He doesn't want to mess with Superman. And he's planning to he took care of the dog, and he himself is just going to disappear now and get out of Dodge. And that's where you have, I think, so far in season 2, the most fired up Clark or Superman with where's the dog? It's great.
Yeah, you could tell it's not, the dog's been an annoyance to him, but he cares about this dog, and does not want to be, and probably looks at it as a personal responsibility that this dog's life is essentially going to be taken because of him, and has to stop it.
Very much so. It was another relatively modern TV reference. I don't know if you ever watched 24, but I did all the seasons, and big fan of Jack Bauer. And it was almost like Jack Bauer vibes. It was like, where's the bomb? Where's the bomb? It was just like, it was great. So Louis reveals he sent the dog dropped the dog off with the dog catcher, and the dog will be put down. So we get a change into Superman, and Superman shows up and rescues the dog from the dog catcher. And as the dog catcher is trying to release just Corky, all the dogs get out. And
he's going to be really bad at his job because he has to be opening and closing those doors all day long and to not be able to handle it at this one time. But I love too the kick that Superman gets out of this, because I'm sure he doesn't interfere with a lot of dog catching businesses, but I think he's happy to have let these dogs be free and live to fight another day.
Yeah, he is very amused at this dog catcher's misfortune. But your point, that hadn't dawned on me, but that's actually really funny. I don't know, maybe the dog catcher's like, I just know how to get them in. He's like getting them out. He's like, that really throws them off. And again, here's where I think the episode could have ended, and I would have been like, all right, that's good. 4 fedoras, no. But it doesn't end here. And so instead, Clark brings the dog back to the Daily Planet, and then he heads back out to do what he does. To get dog food, I think he even says. Jimmy comes back. This bothered me about this episode, where I guess it makes sense. I don't know. Because in the lie detector scene, Hank has some line, I forget the exact verbiage, but he has some line about he's got a plan for Jimmy, right? Like he's going to be of some further use to them. And then he's not. I think just let him go off screen, which is fine. I guess we got to move this along, but that felt a little anticlimactic.
Yeah, I didn't catch that. Yeah, he really is not of any use to them. Doesn't drive anything forward.
Yeah. I'm just shattering the glass left and right here. I'm so sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
And then Lois and Jimmy use the collar, I guess, right? Or the license on the collar to track his address. Which, I don't know, nobody could have done this earlier.
Yeah, this dog's been one. And again, a terrible dog catcher. He just, Louis dropped him into the cart, right? He didn't necessarily, the dog catcher did not catch him, because I was going to say, he's got to be really bad at his job if he's just scooping up dogs with collars too.
I know. Well, given how we saw him fumble with the cage, I wouldn't put it past him. So we now go to Hank and Joyce's apartment. Lois goes in with the dog, reuniting the dog with Hank, and he's offering to get her, cut her a check and send it to the Daily Planet, but she doesn't want the money. She wants the story. It's like, lady, that's like $50,000 in 2024 money. No, but she wants the story. And he just gives her these BS answers about why he offered so much money for the dog. And
had a full steak sitting there too, it looked like.
Yeah, right? And this, I don't know. I felt like would season 1 Lois have backed down this quickly? I don't know. I just felt like, it's just like, this was another scene that to me just felt like a non-starter, where he just kind of gives her the runaround and she's like, well, I guess I better go. And it's like, all right, I know, it's fine.
Yeah. She didn't put up, didn't lead him on with too many good questions there. Just kind of, hey, what's the story? And he's like, I love my dog. And kind of, she kind of just accuses of being a liar and moves on with her day.
Yeah. Don't worry, audience. By the time we get to the halfway point of this season, I'll stop complaining about Noel Neal's Lois Lane. I'll just surrender, but not quite there yet. So then we have our big climax to this episode here, where Hank has the dog lead him to Superman's civilian identity, but the dog barks as Clark is walking the other way, and that gives Clark enough of a heads up to change to Superman, show up, and as you had mentioned earlier, hoist Hank up and hang him from the burglar alarm. They got him.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, when I was rewatching this, I was like, is he just saying the police are going to come get you because you were trying to find out who I am? I had completely forgotten about the kidnapping, and I'm just sitting here like, my God, you might have been better off taking him to the mountain in this scenario, not hanging him up here. But then they make a point to verbalize the after kidnapping Jimmy, and I'm like, oh, okay, that makes a little bit more sense, because otherwise I would have been I would have forgotten about that.
This is another thing I'm a broken record about. I apologize, but it's just like why people even think he has a secret identity always drives me nuts. It's like, why would you even assume? But that's fine. It is what it is. But you bring up a very interesting idea here. And well, Monday morning quarterback, the 70 years later, it would have been interesting to have them put Clark in more of an ethical dilemma. Like he has quote unquote an out in that this guy kidnapped Jimmy. He's got him. Mm-hmm. But if they had made him, I mean, he still could have been this racketeer, but Superman just didn't know about it, or just didn't have any evidence on him or anything like that. Or, I mean, I guess if they had made him just truly an innocent civilian, why would he be trying to figure out Superman's identity? Maybe he's just curious. Like, I guess my point is there's a way to do this where you really put Superman in a tough spot. It's like, I don't really have anything I can imprison this person for other than they found out or are attempting to find out my identity. And then what does he do?
And they could have even restructured it to have Clark on a journalistic investigative look into this bookie syndicate. And maybe that could have been the two worlds colliding a little bit at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? Something like that would have been cool. Even though I like the Jimmy lie detector scene, I think you could have nixed that. You definitely could have nixed the Lois scene. Yeah, I know. I think something like that could have been kind of cool to have to have more of an angle for Clark specifically, and then to have them dovetail. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In any event, we have our final scene here in the Daily Planet of Clark talking to the dog. And it's one of this comes up all the time. And two of our upcoming episodes, next week we have The Face and the Voice. And 2 weeks after that, we have what's considered the best of the series, Panic in the Sky. And, in both of those instances, I mean, just knockout performances by George Reeves. And to see what he does in this scene, talking to a dog, it's like this guy makes it work. It's crazy. This whole conversation about how, essentially like he's, got to go back to live with Joyce because he's got to keep the secret. What was your reaction, especially as from like your memories watching this as a kid and whatnot?
Yeah, and then the very last, you look like you lost your best friend, and he sells that very last line because it's very different from most last lines of this show, where it's very much a sarcastic wink and a nod, and this is more of just a devastated man who did, which a little bit of a stretch. This dog caused a few annoyances in a few days, and had a little bit of fun, but he looks devastated that he has to say goodbye to this dog.
Yeah, no, for sure. So a couple of things. You're right. I mean, in any other episode, it would have been, you look like you've lost your best friend, and something like, oh, well, I'm sure another dog will need rescuing from a well, tomorrow, Lois, like some kind of like little quip or something like that. But this does have more of this melancholy finish to it. Very bittersweet. Again, not to pick this apart, but I think there was something missing here in that if you had seen Clark take the dog home instead of Jimmy taking the dog to the kennel, if you had Clark if you had one scene of Clark at home with the dog, doing anything, but like having a positive interaction. I mean, I guess you get the Superman Corky scene at the well where they're happy with each other.
And then the dog catcher.
Yeah. That's true. So you do have that, but I don't know. I feel like there's something that would have really just kind of tied this together a little bit more.
Yeah. You need one more, just, it doesn't, again, not to keep referencing the Smallville episode, but he gets to know that dog over an episode. There's a lot of, interacting and playing with the dog and the fun moments there, where this one really doesn't have that and tries to pull the same emotional cord at the end.
So here's the thing. I feel like had this been a 15-minute, like let's say instead of, one story for 24 minutes, right? You had 2 12-minute stories in an episode, and this had ended after the dog catcher thing. Okay, fine. That's all well and good. But I agree with you. I think if you're inviting the audience to really feel the pain that Clark is exhibiting at the end here, then I think you need a little bit more. That's all. So, in some respects, it was like too long, but in other respects, you needed a little bit more. Is kind of what I'm getting at here. before we give our rating of this episode out of 5 fedoras, is there anything we didn't talk about this episode that you wanted to?
Yeah. The hidden gem of this one for me on the rewatch, we mentioned earlier, just the small things like the yo-yo bit and the relationship with Hank and Joyce. Like, to me, they didn't have to put those unique twists on it for all intents and purposes, a kid's show. That's something that really made it unique and made the world feel real. But I think we hit most of the big points.
No, but that is a great point. And it's one of those things where as a kid watching this, yeah, you're probably not going to be as dialed into the marriage, the dysfunctional relationship between those characters, or kind of the quirks or mental deficiencies of Louis, right? You're more caught up in the dog. Like, this dog knows Superman's secret, and they're trying to find the dog. But then you watch this as you get old, and you can tap into different aspects. And the fact that the show gives you that, like they plant that there, is great. So definitely good stuff here. So on a scale of 1 to 5 fedoras, Joey, how many would you give The Dog Who Knew Superman?
I'm gonna ignore everything and just go with the nostalgia. I'm gonna say 5. It's if I pull the DVDs out, this is the one I go to. And specifically, this disc is great because it has Panic in the Sky. It has the next one after this is one of my favorites too. Was it The Face and the Voice? Is that what it was? Just if I'm going to sit down and watch it, this disc specifically is the one I'm going to. So this is the essence of the show for me.
Good. No, and given the connection you have, I get that. I love that. I'm glad that it's a 5 for you. This is another big split. We've had a couple of big splits recently. I don't know, 2.5 for me on this one. Yeah, I think I'd be hard pressed to go higher than that. Some charming moments, some good moments along the way, but it didn't come together the way I really needed it to. So we'll go 2.5. So big 2.5 versus 5 is a big split, but it's how it goes sometimes. It's all right.
And I admit wholeheartedly that I know it's the nostalgia talking for me, but to be like Tom Welling, if I'm just going to show somebody one episode of this show, this is probably one of them.
It's all right. Yeah. That's great. Is there anything that you want to plug or anywhere you want to direct people? Like if they want to follow you on social media, anything like that?
Yeah. You can find me on the Always Hold On To network of podcasts, co-hosting Always Hold On To Star Wars, because just what the internet needed was another podcast talking about Star Wars. So you can find me over there, usually defending Anakin in every move he makes, and then occasionally on 33.1 episodes of Always Hold On To Smallville, and that's it.
Awesome. Well, I encourage everyone to check that out. I thank you for your support and for coming on here. It was great. This was the first time you and I ever met or spoke, but it was great that we were able to have you on here. So thank you. And audience, I appreciate you tuning in. As always, we will be back next week with another episode. So make sure you tune in. And until then, remember, only Superman can do super things. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Be sure to check out our sister podcast series, Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey, a weekly exploration of Superman's vast 85-year mythology, available wherever you get podcasts. Please join us on social media, become a patron, and subscribe, rate, and review today. Links are in the show notes. Thank you all.